Everyone out there wants you to believe that buying a home is the way to go if you want to achieve the American dream, and that paying rent is just throwing money away. But what they fail to mention is the darker side of home ownership, like the millions of people every year who get foreclosed on because they didn't buy a house the right way. And nowadays, people are starting to talk about how most of the time your personal home is actually a liability and not an asset unless you buy it the right way. So as someone who just recently bought a home 2 years ago, I want to address this. Buying a home isn't always the right choice, and there's a lot of variables to consider when deciding between renting and buying. So in this video, we're going to explain the pros and cons of renting versus buying, the variables you need to consider when renting or buying, and an easy way to figure out what's right for you, and the 3 rules that I followed when buying my home to make sure that it was going to be a good investment. So stay tuned. Okay, so just to clarify, in this video, we're going to be talking about personal real estate, your home, your primary living location. We're not going to be talking about investment real estate. And if I don't mention this, I know I'm going to get a bunch of comments saying like, wah, 90% of millionaires own real estate. Yeah, they own investment real estate. In this video, we're going to be talking about personal real estate, the home where you live in, and if it's better for you to rent or own it. There's a lot of real estate investors who don't own their own home. Cardone is one of them. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but he's big into real estate and he doesn't own his home, so maybe he knows something that we don't. Another person's Elon Musk. He just came out on the news and said he's selling all his houses and he's going to become a renter. So clearly they believe that in their case it's better to rent than own. So with that, let's take a look at the pros and cons of renting versus buying a home. Okay, let's start with renting. Some of the pros are that you're not really tied down. You can get up and move whenever you want. If you want to get another job in the future, it's better that you're renting because maybe your job is somewhere different. If opportunities arise and you need to relocate for the opportunity, it's going to make it a lot easier to take that opportunity. You also have less responsibility with renting. If something breaks, you can just call the landlord. I know for myself as a homeowner, I've had to deal with sprinklers, I have to deal with sink issues, I've had to deal with washer and dryers breaking. When I rented, if any of these problems happen, I would just message the landlord and they would take care of it. Renting is a lot less risk. You don't have to put down any down payment. You're not tied down to it. The most you're in for is whatever the length of your lease is. You don't have to worry about if the market has a downturn, you have to get rid of it for less than you paid and then you're underwater like most of the people were in 2008. Renting's also cheaper in the short term. You don't have to come up with any of the money for the deposit or closing costs or anything like that. Some of the cons of renting is that it is typically going to be more expensive in the long term because you're not bringing money back into some kind of asset. Your rent can go up when you renew your lease just because there might be more fees that the landlord incurs and he tries to pass over to you. And if your landlord decides to kick you out for whatever reason, they can. I had a situation before we were living with a bunch of roommates and the pipes under the floor burst. So the good thing is it really isn't our responsibility, so the landlord had to take care of it. But because they had to shut everything down to fix it, the landlord actually decided not to renew our lease and kicked us out, and we had 30 days to move out. So that can definitely be a negative if you're not expecting it. Okay, so let's go to buying next, and here are some pros to buying a home. Probably the biggest pro is the leveraged appreciation that you get. Basically, if you only put 20% down to buy a house and the value of the homes in your area are going up, say 3% a year, you'd actually be seeing a return on equity of actually 15% a year because you only put 20% down and the total asset is growing 3%, not just the 20% that you put down. Another pro is you don't have to answer to anybody. This is your house, so you can do whatever you want with it and no one can really tell you what to do. I mean, you know, if you have annoying neighbors, they might not let you party late, and I've had issues with that before. But other than that, no one's gonna kick you out, no one's gonna raise the rent on you. You can also modify and improve your house the way that you like. Sometimes depending on what you do with it can actually raise the value of your investment. And to those people who have a hard time saving, owning a house could actually be a great method to force you to save some money since a percentage of the mortgage payment is going directly into your equity. Some of the cons of owning a house, for one, it's more expensive in the short term. You typically have to put a deposit of 20% unless you get a special type of loan that allows you to do less than that. You're gonna have maintenance costs. And this is something most people don't account for, but basically things break, things need to be changed, things need to be fixed, and that's something that you do need to calculate when making your decision. You're also going to be really tied down to the home. Sure, you can sell it, but selling takes months, and if you didn't give enough time for the house to appreciate, the appreciation might not be able to cover all your closing costs, your realtor fees, and anything else that you might incur from selling the house. There might even be opportunities that arise that because you're so tied down to the house and your location, you might not be able to jump on these opportunities. Those are most of the pros and cons of renting versus buying. If I missed any, please let me know in the comments comments below. So most of those pros and cons are very personal decisions and kind of depend on where you are in your life and where you want to go. But there's a lot of variables to consider that directly correlate to whether renting or buying is actually the better financial decision for you. Common knowledge says that if you can buy a house where the mortgage is less than you're paying for rent, then it will be a good decision. But there's actually a lot of variables that actually go into that decision that most people don't even think about. A better comparison when trying to make the best financial decision for you is to compare the unrecoverable cost of renting versus the unrecoverable cost of owning the house. And yes, there's a lot of unrecoverable costs of owning a house. Only a small percentage, especially in the beginning, only a small percentage of everything you pay every month is actually gonna go into your equity. Most of it is just gonna be unrecoverable costs. So a couple of the bigger things that you have to calculate are the property taxes, the maintenance fees, the HOA fees if you have any, and even cost of capital. And cost of capital is basically what you're gonna be losing out on by investing in a property over investing in something else that might pay a higher return. So one way people like to calculate that is using the 5% rule, and I'll put a link to that somewhere on the video or in the description. And the 5% rule is just a method of calculating to see if renting is actually more viable for you than owning a house, based 1% on property taxes, 1% on maintenance costs, and 3% on cost of capital. But I find the 5% rule very inaccurate, and I have a much easier way to figure it out that won't even require you to do any math. And basically it's just to use a rent versus buy calculator online. There's one that's really accurate, and I'll show you how to do that right now. So the first thing you want to do is go on Google and look for rent versus buy calculator. So the best one from what I've seen is this New York Times one. Click on that, and here you'll enter your details. And for this example, we're gonna be using my house because I know all the details of it. So my house I bought for $390. Close enough. How long I'm planning to stay. This is a big factor. I'll just put 5 years. What are your mortgage details? My mortgage wasn't too cheap when I got it. 4.85%. I put a down payment of 20%. The length of the mortgage was 30 years. What does the future hold? I'd say where I live here, my house is on the water. It's probably gonna go higher than 3% a year, but let's do 3% to be safe. Rent growth rate, 2.5%. I'll just leave it at that. Investment return rate, I probably make more than 4% on my investments over the last couple of years. It's probably been higher than 20, but I'll just put 10 to be safe. This is basically the return that you'd make from other investments like stocks or something, and this will calculate how much money you would make from those investments if you were to put your money in there instead of putting a down payment on your home. Inflation rate 2%, taxes, individual return. Property tax at this place is actually a little bit higher. It's at 1.756. Yeah, that's fine. My marginal tax rate's probably a little higher than that as well. I'd say it's probably about 25%. Closing cost 4%. The cost of selling the home would be 6% with realtor fees and closing costs. Maintenance and renovation, I think 1% a year is pretty accurate. Homeowner's insurance is, yeah, that's actually very accurate. And then monthly utilities that the homeowner would pay otherwise. Not all of them, but just the ones that the homeowner would probably pay if you were renting. And this is probably maximum $200. So let's just monthly common fees like HOA. I don't have any of that. Fees deduction, no fees, additional renting costs. Typically I have to put 2-month deposits when renting. Renter's insurance, I guess that's accurate. When I had a renter's insurance, it was really cheap. So based on my numbers, as you can see, if I can rent a place for $2,384 or less, it would be a lot more financially intelligent for me to just rent instead of buying. But in the area of Southwest Florida I live in, to get a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house on the water with a pool, it would definitely cost a lot more than $2,384. It would probably cost more than $3,000 to be honest. So I think I got a good deal. And what's interesting is this number changes the most depending on how many years you're living at the place. So let's go back up here where it says how long do you plan to stay. As you can see, if you're planning to stay for just 1 year, it's just not worth it. Your cost goes up to $5,000. And what's funny, because the maintenance cost of owning a house, after about 13 or 14 years, the costs start to go back up, as you can see right here. Not by much though. So if you want the easy way to really figure out if renting is a smarter financial decision for you than buying a home, check this calculator out. Now there's some rules that I followed when buying my home that you're gonna wanna follow if you wanna make sure that your house is gonna be a good investment when you buy it. And to be honest, I could probably make a video on each of these rules alone, but I'm gonna try to summarize it for you guys. So rule number 1 is to try and always get a wedge deal when buying a home. And a wedge deal means you're gonna go into a house that's not 100% ready, that maybe it could use a fresh coat of paint, maybe some new floors, a slight remodel that as soon as you do that after you buy it, your house is immediately gonna be worth more and you're gonna be in a good investment. And you wouldn't lose money if you sold it right away. Now, it could be slight cosmetic issues that you have to modify, or it could be big things that you have to do a complete remodel for. It just depends on what you're looking for, your experience, and what you're willing to do. So when I bought this house, it wasn't very updated. So over like the last 2 years, I've slowly remodeled the house. I've put in a total of about $50,000 so far into it. But if I were to sell it right now, based on the comparables, it would probably sell for at least $550,000. So after fees and everything, it would net me almost $80,000 in profit. So if you can, try to find a wedge deal when buying your home. Rule number 2 is to house hack. So the way I do it is I have 2 of my best friends. One is also my business partner. They actually rent a room from me each, and the rent that I receive from them pay basically almost my entire mortgage. So most of the money that I am paying at the end of the month is going mostly into equity. Another way to do it is to get a multifamily house, either a duplex or a 3-unit house. So you can keep 1 unit all to yourself and then rent the other unit or the other 2 units. And the rent that you receive from your other tenants should be able to cover most of your mortgage if you get the right deal. And the third rule that you should follow is to plan to live there for at least 5 years. As you saw from the calculations, when you reach 5 years, that's when you can get most of your unrecoverable costs back in equity from the house. Now, even if you don't follow these rules, some more financially intelligent things to do is to 1, make sure your mortgage, taxes, and insurance don't cost more than a quarter of your monthly income. That way you got a ton of buffer in case anything happens. And also make sure you get a fixed rate mortgage, not an adjustable rate mortgage. Most of the mortgages nowadays are fixed rate, but adjustable rate mortgages are the reason that more than 3 million people in America lost their home in 2008. And fixed rate just means that your rate will never go up or down. So you're gonna have a fixed cost and you're gonna know exactly how much you have to pay every month. So that's all I have for you today. If you know anyone who's trying to make this decision, you think this video will help them, do me a favor and share this with them. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit the like button so I know that I should make more content like this. If you have any questions on this video or ideas for next videos, feel free to leave me a comment below and I'll try to get to it. And if you like videos about finance, entrepreneurship, life hacks, lifestyle design, don't forget to subscribe. And with that, I'll see you next time.